Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to go ahead and get started with our luncheon. I'd like to welcome everybody out today. We've got a great crowd. We've got a great speaker today and a full program. So we're going to go ahead and get started. First and foremost, I'd like to ask Pastor Gary Phelps from Oak Hill Baptist Church to please come forward and bless today's meal before we get started.
Let's pray together, all right? Father, thank you today for your love, your grace, your mercy. Thank you for allowing us as just people to come together and just giving us such a beautiful area to live in. And I pray and lift up this town, this county, even the state, Lord, that you would bless us, give us wisdom in all that we do. Thank you for the food, what's been prepared today. And just thank you for the people, Lord. We live in such a wonderful place. And I thank you, Lord, for being able to be a pastor here in this community and be able to serve you. You've blessed me, and I thank you for that. Just give us a great day. In Jesus' name, amen.
Thank you very much, Pastor Phelps. A few announcements. So first and foremost, you know, it's not every day that the Chamber hires a new employee, but we are very excited. 4 weeks on the job. John Blake Richardson. John Blake's been with us now for about 4 weeks. John Blake is our new assistant business liaison. He graduated from Western on a Saturday and started for work on a Monday. So John Blake, wave at everybody, and let's give John Blake a big round of applause. He's going to do some great work. Everybody make sure to introduce yourselves as our assistant business liaison. He's going to be working with Bill Marshall to connect our membership and to better find ways to accommodate and you know, make your businesses stronger with the Chamber in mind. So thank you very much, John Blake. It's great to have you here with us. Info tables. So as you can see, we have a lot of info tables today. This is a free service. If anybody ever would like to set up for your business or organization at our luncheons, please let us know. We take those on a first come, first served basis, but it's a great way for you to connect with some local groups here in our community. If you've not made your way around, I would encourage you to please consider doing so before you leave today. And I want to recognize everybody that is here. Hendrickson, Prairie Farms Dairy, WTLO, Somerset 106 Radio, SPIDA Community Foundation, Readers to Leaders Storybook Trail, Adventure Therapy Travel, University Center of Southern Kentucky and Somerset Community College, 5-Star Land Title, Campbellsville University, California Closets, Advanced Care Pharmacy, Southern Kentucky Vascular, Crown Staffing, United Way of South Central Kentucky, Highport Digital, Lakeside Memorial Gardens, Wellspring Wellness, First Choice Clinic, AIM, Bailey, Cape Boutique, Somerset Junior Women's Club, Heads Up Digital TV, and Baptist Health Medical Group. Let's give them all a big round of applause also. Again, get to know our business community, take some time, walk around, make some new friends today. That's half the reason we're here, right? So go learn a little bit more about these businesses and organizations, just a few of them before you leave today. Okay, also, we have Mr. Tom Bennett with us today. He is representing the American Battlefield Trust. Dr. Bruce Burkett is also here. Everybody knows Dr. B. They're representing the Mill Springs Battlefield Association. They're here to help us recognize Senator Rick Girdler and Senator Damon Thayer for their commitment to Kentucky history. So at this time, I'm going to turn the microphone over to Mr. Bennett.
Has anybody seen Rick come in yet? Oh, hi, Senator. Good morning. That's the beard. I'm sorry. Good morning, everyone. Thanks for letting us take 5 minutes of your time this morning. About 3 years ago, I was asked by the American Battlefield Trust to work with the Mill Springs Battlefield Association on a piece of state legislation that would create a battlefield fund in Kentucky to match other monies that are available at the federal level, and the private money that comes from the Battlefield Trust Fund in Washington, D.C. And we've had a number of senators who've stepped up to the plate and really done some really good work for historic preservation here at Mill Springs and all over Kentucky. Kentucky has so many battlefields. The only states that are ahead of us are Virginia and Tennessee in the number of battles and the significance of the battles that happened in the Western Front, which is Kentucky. And when the bill was proposed 3 years ago, House Bill 319, to create the fund, Senator Girdler carried it in the Senate for us, and it passed with no dissenting votes. This year, when we went back to Senator Girdler and asked him to help us amend the bill just a little bit, because we're about to celebrate the 250th year of this country. And when we get to the America 250, we've got a couple of battlefields that are Revolutionary War battlefields in Kentucky that are very significant to the formation of this country. Again, Senator Girdler steps up, and he sponsors Senate Bill 144 this year for us, which passed unanimously in the Senate and unanimously in the House. So here we've got a legislator who is able to carry legislation, and granted, it's kind of popular to be for the America 250, but we've never had a dissenting vote on any piece of legislation that he has. When Senator Thayer learned that we were working on this initiative, and every dollar that the state puts up will be matched by another dollar that comes from other sources, he stepped up to the plate as well. We thought we could spend $1 million and match the $1 million that we could get from private and federal funds. Senator Thayer put $3.5 million in the fund. So on behalf of the American Battlefield Trust, the Mill Springs Battlefield Association, we've got a couple of tokens of our appreciation, and if you all would step up here for just a second, and we'll present those to you. Thank you. Why don't you come up here? Why don't you come up here? You got no sandbags up here, do you? Just stand there. Yeah. Thank you. Why don't you get in the middle of it, and I'll go. Yeah. Let me get a couple pictures. That's cool. Thank you. Thank you. One with Colt and one without.
Don't lose the beauty when you do that. Where's Uncle Bill at? Got it? Thank you. I think you need a pick the one that says camera. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Let's give another big round of applause for Senator Thayer and Senator Girdler there. All they're doing to help our community. Thank you so much. Okay, at this time, I'm going to turn the program over to my boss, President of the Chamber this year, Mr. Sean Doherty. As a reminder, just a quick one to put on your calendar, Thursday, July 20th, we're going to be hosting our annual legislative update out at the Harbor Restaurant at Lee's Ford Marina. Always one of the better events of the summer. We'll have our entire state delegation, including Senator Girdler, will be there to tell us a little bit about this past session and maybe some of the things that are going to be potentially coming up this next legislative session as well. So put that on your calendar, 5:30 p.m., the Harbor Restaurant, Thursday, July 20th. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Doherty.
All right, let's call this meeting to order. I'd like to welcome all of our guests, our members, and our sponsors. I'd also like to give a special welcome to our elected public officials. I see that Mayor Alan Keck is here, Senator Rick Girdler. I see John Alexander's here representing Judge Todd's office. I see Donna McClure is here representing Mitch McConnell's office. And, of course, Senator Damon Thayer, our guest speaker, is here today as well. So a special thanks to our elected officials. I think it's very important that our elected officials are involved in the community, and it speaks loads that you all are here. So thank you. I'd also like to recognize our sponsors. Of course, we've got our world-class sponsors, our chairman circle sponsors, and our ambassador circle sponsors. Of course, they fund a lot of the chamber operations, but also I'd like to welcome each member who contributes and gives of their time, making the chamber's mission possible. A special thank you to the Center for Rural Development, who's so gracious and hosts us here with the fine facilities here at the center. Sassy Spoons for catering lunch today, Coca-Cola Bottling of Somerset, and Pepsi Bottling of Somerset as well for the drinks. At this time, I'll have Lisa Phelps come up and introduce our new chamber members for the month.
If you've seen the list, we are blessed with a large amount of new members, and I want to welcome you. As I call your name, you stand to be recognized. Adventures by Erica, Wishing on a Star Travel, Erica Roberts. Adventure Therapy Travel, Judy Duvall. Apex Lawn and Landscaping, Cody Nichols and Hagen Bishop. Arc Stream Service, Michael Curry. Bush Family Cleaning Services, Stephanie Bush. California Closets, Danielle Billings. Car Clinic, LLC, Robert Larson. Country Boy Woodcrafts, Mike Vance and Kevin Goodpaster. Cumberland Developers, Drew Patel. Cumberland Lake B&B, Dawn Greenwalt. Eubank Veterinarian Clinic, Samantha Stapleton. Evans Tavern and Inn, Chrissy Refner. JBA Blevins Trucking, Stanley Blevins. Weichert Realty, Josh Collins, agent. Law Office of Shauna M. Van Hook, Shauna Van Hook. Mayfield Farm Services, Greg Stewart. Northwestern Mutual, Joshua Bird. Remax Lake Time Realty, Barry and Tawana Turner. Snow Aces, Michaela Creech. And Tippy's Restaurant, Tiffany Edens. Thank you so much.
One last group that I'd like to recognize is our chamber ambassadors. The chamber ambassadors, they meet quite frequently and they do a ton of work with various programs for the chamber. So they are the backbone of our chamber, and we're very appreciative of our chamber ambassadors. And speaking of chamber ambassadors, I'd like to present to you your ambassador of the month, Miss Reese Shook. Reese, we appreciate your service, and of course, Reese heads up our YAY program as well and does a great job with that, and we just wrapped up some of the investor panel stuff in the last week, and she's got folks getting ready to compete at Rochester, New York on the national level. So again, thank you, Reese. Of course, today's corporate sponsors, I see both of them represented well here. We have Prairie Farms, which if you didn't see, they have ice cream over here to the left. Mr. Mike Chandler here, we appreciate you guys, Mike, and of course I believe it's National Dairy Month. Is that correct? All right, and I believe, is that why you brought us all that ice cream? Thank you, Mike. We appreciate you sponsoring. And of course, you've yielded your time to our speaker, so Senator Thayer, I understand, will use that time wisely. Plus 5 minutes. But and then also, Hendrickson is our other corporate sponsor, and I see Hendrickson's well represented over here, John Heffelfinger and his crew. We really appreciate you guys being here and sponsoring our luncheon today. So if I could get a big round of applause for both Prairie Farms and Hendrickson. All right, now we're down to that time where we are going to present our guest speaker to you. And I will go over a quick bio, but there's a lot more to this guy than I could talk about in a couple minutes. So let me just tell you, Damon Thayer, a Kentucky senator since 2003, he has spent all his time since then championing bourbon at our state capitol. Damon is only the 8th legislator ever to receive the 100 Proof Award, and he is the only senator to receive that award twice. The 100 Proof Award is presented by the Kentucky Distillers Association and is the highest honor that the bourbon industry gives to elected officials who promote and protect Kentucky's home spirits. A political powerhouse, Damon has received the Kentucky Chamber of Commerce MVP Award 6 times for his razor-sharp focus on the growth of Kentucky businesses. Known for being a constant workhorse for Kentucky, Damon took on the Senate Majority Leader spot in 2013, a role which requires him to act on behalf of the entire Republican majority on the Senate floor. In his spare time, Damon owns and operates Thayer Communications and Consulting, as well as Half Century Equine Ventures, which acquires interest in racehorse partnerships. With such strong Kentucky roots and a personal penchant for the finest Kentucky bourbon, it was only a matter of time until Damon undertook his own venture in Kentucky's signature bourbon industry. So if you will, help me welcome Senator Damon Thayer to tell us all about his venture.
I brought visual aids, and no, you can't all have a sample because that would be illegal. We haven't legalized free bourbon yet. I'm going to start my timer because I don't want our sponsor to regret yielding back his time. I'm Damon Thayer from Georgetown. As you can probably tell by my accent, I wasn't born in Kentucky, but I came here as soon as I could. 30 years ago, as a matter of fact, I moved here to work in the horse business, horse racing specifically. And as you know, I've been in the Senate now for 20 years and 10 years as Senate Majority Leader. I had the great privilege of serving with Chris Girdler during his much too short time, 4 years in the Kentucky State Senate, and we remain close friends to this day. And it's an honor and a privilege to serve with your current state senator, the other Girdler, Rick Girdler, who we refer to now as Mr. Chairman. The senator from Pulaski is the chairman of the Veterans, Military Affairs, and Public Protection Committee. He does a great job, handles anything related to veterans, the military, the battlefields issue that we received the plaque for earlier, and all of the pro-life bills that we deal with in Frankfort that we have passed. They all go through Rick's committee. Proud to say we're one of the most pro-life states in the nation. We have one of the best pro-life bills in America. And despite our governor suing on every one of those, we feel like we will ultimately win and continue to protect the unborn. So Chairman Girdler, along with Representative David Mead and other members of your delegation from here in Pulaski County, are going to give you a complete legislative update at one of your meetings next month. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time on politics or government, but you should know that Pulaski County is well represented by Senator Rick Girdler. He's an important member of our 31-member Republican supermajority, a great voice for your conservative values. As I mentioned earlier, he's in a very strong position as chairman of an important committee. We send him lots of legislation, including some pretty tough bills, and you should have seen him in action this session on the transgender bill that he handled with a lot of adept talent and skill dealing with the screaming left-wingers who were opposed to that bill, which simply states that if you're under the age of 18, you can't take gender-affirming drugs or have surgery to change your gender. I mean, lots of states are going that direction, but they're following the lead that we were setting in Kentucky this session, thanks to the leadership of Rick Girdler. Let's have it for your state senator. So, I do horses, politics, and bourbon. Kind of the Kentucky trifecta. You know, I moved here to work at Turfway Park, the racetrack in northern Kentucky, and later worked for the Breeders' Cup in Lexington for 8 years. I'm a marketing and PR and branding guy, but I got sidetracked into politics 8 years ago, and then made an entry into the bourbon business just a few years ago. So when Bobby Clue asked me to come speak about 6 months ago, that's really good planning, by the way. This is an impressive turnout also. I live in Georgetown, which is the fastest growing city in Kentucky, and if we get a crowd about half this big at our monthly chamber luncheons, we're feeling pretty good. So really great job for showing up and being involved in your Chamber of Commerce. I'm very impressed. So, you know, horses and bourbon are the two signature industries that we have in Kentucky. And bourbon employs about 20,000 people, a couple $2 billion a year in economic activity, brings a lot of tourists into Kentucky who spend a lot of money here on the Kentucky Bourbon Trail. When I'm finished here today, Chris is going to take me over to Horse Soldier to take a look at that impressive facility. And do you know that just 10 years ago, that tasting room experience that you have here wasn't even legal? We had a lot of laws that were passed after Prohibition that were barriers for growth in the bourbon business. And as the son of small business owners and the owner of a couple small businesses myself, I've spent most of my career in Frankfort trying to remove artificial barriers to free enterprise. That's why, and I need to update my bio, because I've now won the State Chamber of Commerce MVP Award 8 times for standing up for businesses of all sizes. Because businesses are what make Kentucky work. So about 10 years ago, we started taking a serious look at our bourbon laws, and there were all sorts of barriers that were erected after Prohibition was repealed. You could go tour a bourbon distillery, but you could only buy a couple of bottles. You couldn't get much more than a few ounces in a sample, and you couldn't even have a cocktail made with the bourbon distilled at that particular facility. So we've changed all of those laws, and you all know what's happened with the growth of this bourbon industry. It's one of the true success stories in Kentucky's economy. We continue to see more bourbon distilleries open, more tourist attractions open. You've got places that make staves. I saw a big load of white oak moving its way down I-75 when I was driving to Somerset today. And, you know, when people build new distilleries, they create really well-paying jobs. I think the average job at a distillery in Kentucky pays $80,000 a year. So these are well-paying jobs that are making a serious contribution to Kentucky's economy. So I was never much of a bourbon drinker. Nothing that I'm opposed to. I mean, I'm Catholic, right? You know, came here to work in the gambling business, you know, in horse racing. So I was never opposed to it, but I never really drank it very much. But then when we started, I sort of was naturally attracted to the industry's claim of having a lot of government barriers erected to its progress, and so started getting invited to a lot of ribbon cuttings and groundbreakings as the bourbon industry started to grow, and decided I kind of liked it, and started doing some research, and I discovered this lapsed bourbon brand called Kentucky Senator Bourbon. Did some research on it, and it originally started in northern Kentucky, up in Covington, and then it was sold to Double Springs Distillers in Bardstown, and it was just sort of an everyday sort of bourbon, and in the 70s, it just sort of petered out. There was nobody willing to continue manufacturing that bourbon. So I came up with this crazy idea one day to revive the Kentucky Senator Bourbon brand, bring it back as a premium brand, and name it after U.S. senators from Kentucky. You know, there's 52 of them, and we've been around since 1792. We were the 15th state admitted to the Union, so we've had U.S. senators for a long time. And the interesting statistic is, with the recent deaths of Senator Ford, Senator Huddleston, Senator Bunning, my mentor in Kentucky politics, there are only 2 U.S. senators from Kentucky left, and they happen to be the current occupants of the office, Senator McConnell and Senator Paul. So I continued to do my research, and obviously anytime when you're in the legislature and you start a new business, you run it by the Kentucky Ethics Commission, and I ran the prospect by the Ethics Commission, and they said, yes, it's perfectly fine as long as you continue to name those bottles after U.S. senators. It's no conflict with your job as a state senator. So I went to one of my best friends and my lawyer. His name is Andre Regard. He's a lawyer in Lexington, and I said, hey, I want to bring this bourbon brand back, and I need someone to do all the legal work. There's a lot of legal work to do in the bourbon business. You've got to get local government approvals, state government approvals, federal government approvals. Plus, we were raising money from investors, so we needed to do a private placement memo and things like that. And I didn't know anything about that side of the business. I'm a marketing guy. I'm a branding guy. And so I wanted my lawyer to handle all the legal work, and he said, well, how about this? He said, let's go 50-50. We'll split the company. He says, you do all the marketing and branding, I'll do all the legal work, and we'll figure everything else out. I said, okay, that sounds like a deal. So we formed the Kentucky Senator Spirits LLC. And then we had to go through the trademark process. So we submitted the Kentucky Senator Bourbon brand to the U.S. Patent Office in Washington, D.C., and we waited breathlessly for 6 months to see if anybody who was connected to the previous brand would protest our usage of the name, and nobody did. So we own that brand, Kentucky Senator Bourbon, under our LLC, Kentucky Senator Spirits LLC. Then we raised a little bit of money from some friends and set out to launch our business. Well, there are 3 ways to get in the bourbon business. One, you can build your own distillery, which is about, probably anywhere from $8 to $15 million. So that was off the books for us. The other was to become a contract distiller, where you go to an existing distillery, work with them and develop your recipe or mash bill, and then age the bourbon and bottle it under your own brand. Well, that was, for a startup that wanted to get going right away to establish a brand, that was off the table, although we are working on that as a next step, and I'll come back to that later. The other way to enter the bourbon business is as a non-distiller producer, where you buy already existing bourbon, bottle it under your label, and sell it. So that's the route we chose, to become a non-distiller producer. The hard part is finding the bourbon, because our bourbon is Kentucky Senator, and we passed a law several years ago that I voted for that said, if your label has Kentucky in the name, you have to use bourbon that was distilled in Kentucky. So Kentucky Owl, Kentucky Gentleman, things like that has to be in Kentucky, because in the past there had been brands that had Kentucky on the label that would use bourbon from another state. Now, by the way, 95% of the world's bourbon is distilled here in Kentucky. The other 5% isn't worth drinking. Although we are, anytime you're at the top, at the pinnacle, there are people trying to knock you off, and there are distilleries in places like Wyoming, Colorado, Texas, New York, that are building distilleries pretty rapidly to try to knock us off. So far, we're holding up pretty well. So we could have got a much earlier start if we wanted to use Indiana bourbon, but that would be against the law. Because I don't know if you all know this, right across the border from northern Kentucky in Lawrenceburg, Indiana, at the old Seagram's distillery is a company called Midwest Grain Producers. And they make pretty good bourbon because, they're within sight of the shores of Kentucky. So it's not bad. If you've had OKI bourbon, which is the precursor to New Riff, or if you've had Boone County bourbon, or J.P. Magnus, or Old Scout, these are all bourbon brands that have launched using bourbon from MGP, Midwest Grain Producers in Indiana. So we were talking to a guy who had 100 barrels of MGP juice aging at Castle and Key Distillery near Frankfort. And then Eric Gregory from the Kentucky Distillers Association reminded me, he said, Damon, do you remember that bill you voted for that said you've got to have Kentucky juice in a bottle that says Kentucky? I said, smack my head. So we wasted a year negotiating on bourbon that we couldn't legally use, and since I helped make the laws, I figured it would probably be good for me to follow them. So we had to go back in search of more bourbon, and it is really hard to find already aged Kentucky bourbon that someone will sell you. But we got really lucky at the end of 2020, early 2021. We found out through a broker that there was some 15-year-old bourbon coming on the market in a tote, a food-grade, industrial-sized, commercial-grade tote. About 8 barrels worth of 15-year-old bourbon had been dumped in these totes, and the brokers were selling it. Now, we don't know officially where that bourbon came from, but let's just say it was Knob Creek. We got our hands on some 15-year-old Knob Creek that turned out to be some fantastic tasting bourbon. We got the tote and had it shipped to Lexington. It was the coldest day of the year in late January, early February 2021. By the way, we were still dealing with COVID and trying to work around all the lockdowns and shutdowns that Governor Beshear put us through. I know I can say that because I know Pulaski County is going to vote for Daniel Cameron this fall. See the chairman standing over here. Feel pretty confident about that. We're counting on you guys for a big margin down here, by the way. So we were navigating the cold and the tote was freezing cold, and you can't bottle bourbon when it's freezing cold. And we were up against the deadline. Remember, we had gotten our permission from the U.S. Patent Administration, and you have to have your product on the shelves by a certain date. Otherwise, we would lose our patent. So the bourbon came in to the FedEx shipping facility on the Friday before the Saturday that we were going to put it in the bottle. We were bottling at Bluegrass Distillers in Lexington. You've probably seen their bourbon out there, some pretty good stuff. We were their first contract bottling client, and we had to figure out how to get the bourbon in this tote from the FedEx plant to Bluegrass Distillers. So my business partner, showing you what a great guy he was, got his ex-wife's new husband to take his pickup truck to the FedEx location for a bottle of Eagle Rare 10-year and shipped it across town to Bluegrass Distillers in time for us to put it in the bottle. Well, it was still too cold for the labels to stick, so we had to wait another day for the bourbon to warm up enough so we could get a few bottles bottled up and on the shelves by the end of that week. Now, in Kentucky, we have a 3-tier system. So we're the first tier. We're considered the manufacturer. Then we have to sell it to the distributor, and then the distributor sells it to the retailers. That's part of the 3-tier system that's left over from post-prohibition. So we made it under the deadline, and as I told you, I brought visual aids. We got our first, these, by the way, we're not drinking these today. These are mocked up samples for photography purposes only that I grabbed off my display shelf at home to show you. Some of them have coffee in them. Some of them have some $5 bourbon I bought, bottom shelf bourbon, just for color, for photography purposes. But this was our first bottle. 15-year-old bourbon. It sold for $119.99 a bottle, and it was sold out within a week. The first bottle, to show you how magnanimous I am, was named after a Democrat who was against horse racing and for prohibition, Chris Girdler. He was against everything I'm for and for everything I'm against. But he was a pretty major figure in Kentucky history, and that'd be Senator Alvin Barkley from Paducah. And we were off to the races, so to speak, with this 15-year bourbon. We won multiple awards, got great reviews, and we suddenly had something that started out as a hobby with the potential to be a real going concern. So we lucked into some more bourbon. 4 months later, we bought 25 barrels of then 5-year-old bourbon from a broker. And again, can't say where it came from, but let's just say it came from the Barton Distillery in Bardstown. We have ways to find these things out. We let it age until it was 6 years old. And so, of course, I had to name it after a one-termer because the U.S. Senate term is 6 years. So I actually found the first ever Republican to serve as a U.S. Senator from Kentucky. His name is William J. DeBow from Crittenden County in western Kentucky. And this was our second release, the 6-year-old bourbon, the William J. DeBow release. Interestingly, story about DeBow. He was a state legislator in Frankfort, and this was back in the day when the legislature decided on who the U.S. senators were. This was before the direct election constitutional amendment for the direct election of U.S. senators was passed. So there was you all know the history. We've just recently become a Republican state, but there was a time during the late 19th century where the Republicans briefly held control of the state House of Representatives, where DeBow was very popular. The Democrats, as they used to do when they had control, they fought amongst themselves and couldn't decide who to nominate to be the U.S. Senator. So the House, the state House, controlled by Republicans, voted for DeBow. He got enough of the disaffected Democrats to vote for him, and he became a one-term U.S. Senator. 6 years later, the Democrats got control of the state House again and put one of their guys in. I mean, it wasn't until the late 19th century that we had a Republican from Kentucky. It's hard to imagine that now. We haven't had a Democrat serve as a U.S. Senator from Kentucky since Wendell Ford, and we probably won't in any time in the near future, thankfully. But we like to say we serve up great bourbon with a side of Kentucky history. So we kept on trying to move around the state, and last year we aged those barrels another year and released a 7-year bourbon. It's got a green label. We named it for Senator John G. Carlisle of Covington, because last year was the 121st anniversary of the Bottled in Bond Act, which is the first ever consumer protection act in America that still is going strong today. So we named that release after John G. Carlisle from Covington. And now here's the local hook that I think you're all going to be excited about. Next week, we are going to bottle our 4th release of Kentucky Senator Bourbon. It'll be 8 years old. It'll be distributed around Kentucky by our distributor, Kentucky Eagle. And as you may have read in the Commonwealth Journal, it's going to be named after your hometown U.S. Senator, John Sherman Cooper, from right here in Pulaski County, Somerset. It's going to be done in the goldish yellow colors of Center College, where he attended. And we're really excited about this release. It seems that word is out because several liquor store owners from this area have already been in touch with me to find out how they can get an allotment. So I'm glad to see that there's going to be demand for that here in Somerset. Here's a little interesting factoid. According to Kentucky law, if someone has been deceased 50 years or longer, you can use their name, image, or likeness for commercial purposes. But if someone's been deceased less than 50 years, you have to get permission from their family. So earlier this spring in April, I came down to Somerset to try to meet with Miss Cornelia Cooper, who had agreed to meet with me to get permission to use Senator Cooper's name, image, and likeness on the bottle. That afternoon, Miss Cooper didn't really feel up to meeting with somebody, so I had the pleasure of meeting with Frank Kane. Got to tour his house and pitch him on the idea, and he agreed. And so we are going to move forward with the John Sherman Cooper release, and it'll have the same label on the front, and on the back of every bottle is a photo of the subject along with a short bio that I've written about him. And he was an incredibly accomplished man, one of the most consequential Kentuckians of the 20th century. Close friend with John F. Kennedy when they were in the U.S. Senate together. Socialized with President Kennedy and Jacqueline Kennedy. Served on the Warren Commission to investigate the assassination of President Kennedy. The first Republican in Kentucky history to be elected to more than one term in the U.S. Senate. Ambassador to India. Friend of presidents. Mentor to U.S. Senator Mitch McConnell. A true diplomat and a great Kentuckian. And I'm proud that we're naming our next bourbon release after Somerset's own John Sherman Cooper. So that's our little odyssey that Bobby asked me to talk about. We're moving into phase 2. We're trying to raise money to start distilling our own bourbon, to do that contract distilling process I mentioned earlier. So this summer we're going to sit down with a distillery in central Kentucky and work out our own mash bill and start aging our own bourbon, but that won't be on the market for another 4, 5, or probably 6 years. For me, the sweet spot for bourbon starts when it hits around 5 or 6 years old. So we'll continue to release this Barton Juice for probably 2 more years, and then we've got barrels of Green River bourbon aging in Owensboro that'll hopefully get us through to when our own bourbon reaches the maturation point that I feel it's appropriate to go to market with. So you can start a small business in Kentucky on a hope and a dream and an idea and a little bit of investors' money and a little bit of your own personal savings. And hopefully someday we can take this thing big time to where we're not just selling here in Kentucky, but we can sell it around the country. So I appreciate your time and attention this afternoon. Chris Girdler tells me he's going to throw a party for us this summer to launch the bourbon here in Somerset. So maybe I'll see you all there, and then it will be legal to taste the bourbon. So we're going to crack open 6 barrels of this bourbon on Friday and do a single barrel select for Liquor Barn. Liquor Barn's one of our biggest retailers, but I've already told our distributor to make sure that Wildcat and Eagle and some of the other stores here in Pulaski County get a good allocation. So be on the lookout for the John Sherman Cooper release by the end of this month. Thank you so much for your time and listening today.
Senator Thayer, we really appreciate you coming down and talking with us today, and we would like to present you with our very own friend of the chamber.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Appreciate it. Thank you. Got to take good care of these. Give this back to you since it's not real. I'll bring the real thing this summer.
All right. So here we are at the end of another chamber luncheon. Good job, Senator Thayer. We've got a couple minutes to spare and give our giveaways out. So I've got a track record of getting us out of here by 1 o'clock, so I'd like to keep that. Thank you. First, in our drawing here, we have 20% off of M&W Printing. And the lucky recipient is ticket 8656868. Back there in the back center, Mr. Phelps. There you go. All right, and that was, of course, donated by M&W Printing. The second we have is a $20 RB Dry Cleaner, donated by RB Dry Cleaners. 749-070. 070. Ooh, somebody must have left early. I can't hardly believe that. No, okay. 749-088. 088. All right. Next, we have a $25. No, we didn't. Oh, wait a minute. We're still on the $20 RB Dry Cleaner. It's gone? Okay. All right. We are on to the Buffalo Wings and Rings gift card. $25 donated by Buffalo Wings and Rings. Ticket ending in 115. 115. Ooh, okay. Wait a minute. We got it? There we go. Back there in the back, right. All right, next we have a Hardee's gift card, $20, donated by Hardee's South. That is ticket ending in 027. 027. All right, Rakaya. Okay. Next, we have the farm to table. And this is, of course, compliments of Prairie Farms. Let me read here. Congratulations, you have won a farm to table tour. You and 2 guests will have an opportunity to visit a state-of-the-art robotic dairy farm. After that guided tour, you'll all get another one here at Prairie Farms, the Somerset Division. So, the lucky recipient, 033. 033. Farm to table, 033. No takers? Where's our 033? All right. Zero 44. 044. Here we go. Okay, and our other sponsor, Hendrickson, has a gift bag and gift certificate. And the lucky recipient is white ticket 880. 880. Right here, Reese. All right, that's all our giveaways. Next month's chamber meeting is on July the 11th. Right here, again at the Center for Rural Development. So don't forget to plan to be here for July 11th. Now that is a week later than normal because July the 4th is the first Tuesday. We will not have our luncheon on July the 4th, but rather July the 11th. Mike Chandler says there's more ice cream back here to your left, so please go enjoy and have a great afternoon. I have forgot one thing. If I could, before we leave, if I could get Chris Girdler, would you lead us in the pledge? Would you lead us in the pledge before we leave? Sorry about that.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.